Of course, when we knit socks, we're hoping for perfect ones, but sometimes on the circular sock knitting machine, they don't come off perfect. There's another video about fixing things while you're still on the machine. This one is about perfecting socks that come out like this. This one was bad because I was still getting the machine back to work and I had some faulty needles, but it's actually fixable. Let's do it methodically, bit by bit. Let's start with this dropped stitch that did not run. We want to basically duplicate stitch, come up from the bottom and retrace the yarn path that it should have made to connect to the next stitch up. We never want to have a knot in the sock. Therefore, I always start by weaving in the yarn I'm working with through the backs of a few stitches. And now I'm just duplicate stitching so that this stitch is connected to the stitch it should have been connected to where I short rowed the toe. Each stitch in knitting has the yarn pass through it twice, once coming up out of the stitch and once going down. Once I've done that and anchored it to the nearby stitches, I'm repeating the weaving in process on the back so we can snip the yarn flush with the fabric. It won't make an unpleasant bump that could hurt in wear, and we can just snip it off. Here's a stitch that did run. When that happens, you get a ladder effect. Stick your latch tool or even a spare needle into the first true stitch that remains at the bottom of the ladder and go up the ladder, pulling one rung through the next rung all the way to the top. This will make the run totally disappear and good as new. And then all we have to do is close that ugly hole that appears at the top. The reason these look so bad is that the legs, the bottom of the stitch above, is spread out rather than pulled together as it would have been if the two rows were connected in the normal manner. So, having brought the yarn up through the center of this final stitch in our ladder, we now have to go around the right leg, inside the fabric, around the left leg with the needle, pull through, and then down through the center of the last stitch that we just latched up, and the whole thing will be good as new. It's absolutely amazing and so joyful to see those holes close up. Then we go through the weaving in process so that the yarn can't get away and allow the run to start again, and yet we don't have a lump in the sock. This one looks just dreadful because two stitches side by side ran, and to make matters worse, they dropped where I was short rowing the heel, and that always is a risky spot, and also where the short rows join each other, it'll look even worse. So I latched up one ladder, and of course it kind of hogged the yarn. I've got to tug a little harder to latch up the second one and make them even, but it works just fine. We're mostly there. On this sock, there were two problems in the same area. One was a missed wrap in the heel. The automatic wrap somehow failed or dropped, so I have a hole there, and I'm going to weave up to it, try to restructure it and close it as though there had been a proper wrap, so that disappears. There were no run stitches here, but I don't want to wear the sock with that gaping hole. And you'd be surprised how well you can emulate that wrap if you pay attention to the ones near it and try to copy them. And because this is so near to the hole that we just latched up to, I'm going to use the same strand of yarn, work it through some stitches, the backs of some stitches, and then come over and close the hole that was formed where those two stitches ran side by side. Sometimes a rung of the run ladder can hide inside the shadows of the sock, so be super careful to make sure every single rung has been latched up, because the issue won't disappear no matter how carefully you work if it is not. Now, up through the stitch that's at the top of the ladder that you just fixed, and emulate the way the short row should have joined the other side of the short rows. Up through the stitch at the top of the ladder, around the stitch on the other side of the short rowing operation, then down again through the top stitch of the ladder. And let's repair the second ladder, which did run a little while I was handling it, but no biggie. We know how to fix it. Since these two stitches are side by side, I can use the yarn that's already emerging from the first column I fixed to secure this column. That would actually be how it was in the original knitting. First going across to join to the other side of the short rows, then up through the top stitch on the ladder. Now close that hideous hole by going around the spread legs of the stitch above and back down through our top ladder stitch. And there we go. Now down into the work so we can take the yarn to the back to weave in. It does take a little time and a little learning to control the tension in your hand to perfect this process, but it's so worth it. My socks are good as new.